Coming up on ITV News Central, 2 years on from the riots, West Midlands police hunt 79 suspects. Details next. Hello, this is ITV News Central. Tonight's main stories. The Prime Minister's plea to boycott some websites after the father of a cyberbullying victim speaks out.
2 years on and still looking. How police are determined to catch the rioters.
Forced to leave earlier this year, now Gypsy launch a new appeal to return to land.
And dogged determination. Paralympian Richard Whitehead on not letting disability get in his way.
Good evening. The father of a teenager who took her own life after being bullied online has spoken about her for the first time since her death. In exclusive footage from the Daily Mirror, Dave Smith talks about the bullies who drove his daughter to suicide.
It's emerged major companies are withdrawing ads from Ask FM, the social networking site on which Hannah Smith was targeted. Today, the Prime Minister has also urged people to boycott sites that aren't properly regulated. Jane Hesketh reports.
I was 50 miles away in a lorry and I got a phone call from Joanne to say Hannah has hung herself. I had to then ring back to find out what was happening because I didn't have the faintest idea what was happening.
The following day, Dave and his partner Deborah saw the vile messages that had been posted to Hannah on a social networking site.
I just felt, who could put my little girl through that? And it wasn't like she was a horrible person, she was the nicest person in the world.
How could you? People need to stop and think, and you can't just sit behind a keyboard and type something and think, oh, that doesn't matter. There's a complete lack of emotional intelligence.
Someone who knows what it feels like to be bullied relentlessly is Abby from Hinckley in Leicestershire. She was targeted for 6 years, face-to-face and online.
It was a horrible experience. It's something that I wouldn't wish on anybody to go through, and it was even worse for my parents because they didn't know what was happening. I chose not to tell them, so I suffered in silence for 4 years. And emotionally it just destroys you because you don't know who to trust. When somebody comes up to you and you start to get to know them, you don't know whether they're going to be a long-term friend or if suddenly they're going to turn on you.
In 2005, Abby set up a website called Ab's Kids to offer advice and support to other young victims. It's been a success with nearly 500,000 hits, and yet she still received abusive comments and even death threats at first, which her parents had to filter out. Today, David Cameron made his thoughts clear on cyberbullying as he toured a hospital.
Just because someone does something online, it doesn't mean they're above the law. If you incite someone to do harm, if you incite violence, that is breaking the law, whether that's online or offline. And I want to make sure we take as much action as we can. But also there's something all of us can do as well as parents and as users of the internet, and that is not use some of these vile sites. Boycott them. Don't go there. Don't join them. We need to do that as well.
Hannah was bullied anonymously on the social network site ask.fm. In their safety section, they say anonymity shouldn't be used to ask questions that are mean or hurtful, and that they can supply identifying information to the police. Ask.fm have described Hannah's death as a true tragedy and have promised to work with Leicestershire Police, who are investigating. Jane Hesketh, ITV News in Hinckley.
As we saw there, if you are being bullied online, there is help out there, and there is more advice on our website, itv.com/central.
A public inquiry has begun to determine whether gypsies who are forced to leave an illegal camp near Solihull can return to the land they own.
Solihull Council has refused permission for 2 temporary pitches next to the site in Merredin, which they left last year. The gypsies are appealing that decision. Kate Fisher reports.
Right, good morning ladies and gentlemen. I'm now going to open the inquiry. Another day, another dispute over land owned by gypsies in Meriden.
The inquiry is into an appeal by Mr Noah Burton against the decision by Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council to refuse planning permission.
This yard is the site in question. It's next to the field where the gypsies had been living illegally until they were evicted earlier this year. They want to put 2 caravans on here for 12 months while they wait for the council to finish building a new site a few miles away in Solihull. Noah Burton, who owns the land, says it would mean that his mother Jane could be looked after, as well as close family friend Senga Townsley, who has mobility problems. The gypsies say that this site would be the perfect place for Jane and Senga to live temporarily whilst the council prepares alternative land for them in Solihull. But the protesters say this land simply isn't suitable for vulnerable people.
If the travellers were looking for the worst place and the worst site to develop in the West Midlands, they found it in Meriden. The site floods, it's inaccessible, it's cut off in the snow, there are serious car accidents in that lane. This is no place to put vulnerable people, elderly and disabled people, which is what they're proposing to do.
But the gypsies say that this part of the land with its hard surface doesn't flood, and with just 2 families on the site there would be very little extra traffic. Despite the numbers of local protesters, not all the neighbours are against it.
Nice people, got on well with all of them. I knew 19 of them quite personally, you know, up and down the lane. I like them.
So it seems does the gypsy's lawyer. She's not charging for her services. The inquiry is set to last 5 days. The planning inspector will then report to the community secretary Eric Pickles, who will make the final decision. Kate Fisher, ITV News, Meriden.
Administrators overseeing changes in the way NHS healthcare is provided at some Staffordshire hospitals have been meeting local council and health chiefs to discuss their plans.
Yes, last night those same administrators were shouted at during a public meeting about proposals to downgrade services at Stafford Hospital. Andy Bevan reports from this afternoon's meeting in Lichfield.
This was a meeting between Staffordshire County Council's Health and Wellbeing Board, whose members include the local district and borough councils, the police and various health groups, and the Trust Special Administrators, who are overseeing the dissolution of the Mid-Staffordshire NHS Foundation Trust in the light of the scandal at Stafford Hospital. Last night, the administrators were given a noisy and hostile reception at a public meeting in Stafford because they're recommending the closure of maternity, paediatric and critical care facilities at Stafford Hospital to make it more viable. Some managers from the hospital who were at the meeting claimed they hadn't been consulted about the planned closure of their departments. There was a similar but much calmer meeting this morning in Cannock, where the administrators plan to increase services at Cannock Chase Hospital. This afternoon, the administrators came here to Lichfield to a regular meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It ended about an hour ago, and here's what both sides had to say about how things went.
A lot of questions varying from finance to clinical operations, quite a lot on maternity. It touched on ambulance services, it touched on out-of-hours services, and basically I think most of the Health and Wellbeing Board are quite satisfied at this early stage with the answers they've been given. Obviously a lot more to learn yet, but first impressions are quite good, we feel.
The biggest challenge was over our recommendations in relation to births in Stafford, which obviously I completely understand is a very, very sensitive subject, and we were challenged hard on that, and I would expect that. But I think there's also an understanding that things have got to change, and with a series of hospitals that are not clinically sustainable and not financially sustainable, things can't remain as they are today.
The administrators say they'll take on board everything that's been said at all the meetings, and their consultation period ends on October the 1st. Andy Bevan, ITV News.
Well, the time's coming up to 10 minutes past 6. You're watching ITV News Central, still to come. A flying visit, the Dreamliners' thank you to Rolls-Royce.
Plus, Paralympian Richard Whitehead on his 40 marathon challenge. Now, there remain shocking scenes still vivid in many people's minds, but it's now exactly 2 years since Birmingham and Nottingham came under attack by rioters. Today is the second anniversary of the unforgettable nights when violence spread through areas of the Midlands.
Police say they've prosecuted the majority of suspects involved in the riots, but they've sent a warning to the remaining few that they will be caught. In a moment, we'll be speaking to Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth from West Midlands Police. But first, this report from Sally Lockwood.
They were days of madness and destruction. A police station attacked by firebombs and high streets raided by gangs of looters. Nottingham and Birmingham city centres resembled war zones.
We could have been actually killed in there if we would have tried to take people on, and we could have died in there.
Dennis Hamilton moved his business to a safer area after the riots, but says he lives in fear of it happening again.
We're still recovering now. Every time you hear there's going to be a march or crowds gathering, you're always weary and thinking it could spark off again. And you just worry. You don't want to go through that trauma. You just don't want to go through it again.
The rioting spread from the city centre out down the Bristol Road here. There was concern at how many young people were caught up in the looting and violence. Almost half of those prosecuted in Nottingham and almost a third of those prosecuted in Birmingham were under the age of 18. A young mob attacked this petrol station in the early hours of the morning, stealing whatever they could and terrorising staff. The justice system came down hard on those found guilty in the immediate days after the riots. The sentences imposed were far harsher than typically given for similar offences, but there's been criticism of the government's response to the issue since. One local MP saying the lessons of 2 years ago have been ignored.
What the government needed to do is support young people who are leaving school now without any qualifications or training. We have long-term young unemployed people who are not doing anything, and this is where we have a generation of lost young people, and we need to bring them back into employment, into useful active roles in community.
A government statement in response to these comments said we can all learn lessons from the events witnessed in August 2011 and have a responsibility to ensure that we never see a repeat of those shocking scenes. Many of the riots panel's recommendations reflect this and support the government's work to strengthen socially responsible attitudes and reform public services. After his terrifying ordeal, the owner of this petrol station was inspired to help young people locally and will open a youth centre in Aston later this month.
It was such a traumatic experience. You could almost say, like being in a war almost. It was like a war zone for those few days. And it had a really powerful effect on me and all the people that I knew. And it was a time for change, which is why we're here today. We're opening the only youth club in the area, which is just a shipping container in a park.
Dennis Hamilton's son and friends were also inspired to do something, making a film about their experience.
It's out in September and we want to be recognised as filmmakers, and we're also trying to bring some of the youths that might have been involved into media, into television, etc. and try to get them to leave that negativity on the streets.
West Midlands Police still have images of 79 people on their website wanted in relation to the riots. 2 years on, their message is, "We'll find you," and they're calling on suspects to hand themselves in. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And let's talk now to Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth from West Midlands Police. Now, we're talking about the riots which were 2 years ago, which is obviously hard to believe in itself. You're still looking for 79 suspects. Are you confident they will hand themselves in?
Well, I don't know if I'm confident they'll hand themselves in, but I'm absolutely confident that ultimately we'll bring them to justice, however long it takes. And my advice to them would be, don't sit there waiting for the knock at the door. Hand yourselves in and put it behind you and get it out of the way, because we will come for you and we will find you.
We saw on some of those pictures there the effect that the riots had on some of the communities involved. How was your relationship affected by the riots with those communities, and what's happened since in terms of maybe repairing those relationships?
Well, we don't underestimate the seriousness of the impact that this had and the tragic events back in August 2011. But strangely, there are some positive legacies from that, and you heard some of them in the films preceding this piece, around people being inspired to come together. And certainly from our perspective, we're in a much stronger position in terms of the relationships that we have with our communities as a result of what happened then.
Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but with hindsight, how would you describe how the riots were handled at the time?
Well, there was lots of discussion and debate both at the time and in the immediate aftermath, and I think if you look through, there was a huge range of reviews done immediately afterwards, and I think the response here in the West Midlands was recognised amongst being one of the best operational responses across the country. We made over 100 arrests on the first night of the riots here in Birmingham, and we've continued with that pace as well. We've arrested over 775 people now, and we'll have a relentless pursuit of those people that remain outstanding.
We also heard in Sally's report some degree of nervousness, people sort of almost waiting for something similar to happen again. What with cutbacks, particularly to the police, the number of police officers available to you, how confident are you and how can you reassure people that you would be ready to jump to action again if a similar thing happened?
Well, clearly there are fewer police officers across the country now than there were 2 years ago, but I can reassure people we've made lots of changes internally to how we do our business and lots of our processes to make sure we've got the right people in the right place at the right time. We've still got the same number of right-trained officers now as we had 2 years ago. We've got much stronger national mobilisation procedures which enable us to bring officers in from across the country to swell a particular location at times of need.
What would your message be then to somebody who's watching who may well have been involved in the riots? What would you say to them?
Well, if you're watching and you're involved in the riots, I can be very clear. Hand yourselves in, because at this moment in time there are 79 images still on our website. They're very identifiable. If you're on there, we will find you, we'll come for you. If it takes the next 5 years, however long it takes, we'll come for you. And every knock at the door, whatever the time of day, you'll be wondering if that's us.
Okay.
Very clear. Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth, thank you very much for joining us.
Now, a farmer who lost more than half of his cattle to bovine TB has told ITV News Central about the devastating effect it's had on him economically and emotionally.
Mervyn Mullard's farm in Shropshire is thought to be infected with the disease. It's also seen a rise in the population of badgers. And today, the Environment Secretary visited the farm ahead of the badger cull pilots that are due to start in the West Gloucestershire and West Somerset area. Mark Goff reports.
Mervyn Mullard has lost 133 cows to bovine TB in the last 6 years. These are beef cattle. It costs Mervyn time and money to rear each animal, recouping the cost and perhaps profit when they go to slaughter for food. So every time a beast catches bovine TB and has to be killed, Mervyn loses money. And that's happened 133 times.
I actually haven't worked the exact figures out. It would frighten me, I think, if I did. So I think it's best not to look back. And I have to just keep trying to alter the way I farm so that I can continue to make a profit, hopefully, at the end of the day. If I was a farmer who'd only just started up, it would have broken me.
The government has approved a badger cull to prevent TB spreading.
There's one under that ash tree down there.
The minister in charge visited Mervyn's farm near Bishop's Castle in Shropshire today. But culling is controversial. The RSPCA today told us they care as much about cattle as badgers, but they don't believe a cull will halt TB, and it could wipe out healthy badgers.
It's perfectly clear that in an area like this, where there's a big increase in the badgers, where there is bovine TB in the badgers, it's idiotic not to address the disease in the badgers as well as the cattle. And if you look at a country like the Republic of Ireland, where they've done that, they used all the same cattle movement controls as we have, tough controls, skin test, and then slaughter of cattle. They've also removed diseased badgers, and they've reduced bovine TB in cattle.
TB has wiped out many of Mervyn's cattle. He gets compensated, but it's less than what it cost him to rear. And the cost isn't just economic.
You can imagine all the animals on this farm, other than the stock bull, have been born on the farm. So they're almost like your own children. So to see them go, particularly the youngsters, I mean, it isn't quite so bad for the older animals, although you've known them for a lot longer and they're almost good friends.
Friends he has to see destroyed. The last time one of his animals was found with TB was in December. He hopes it's the last. Mark Goff, ITV News, Shropshire.
ITV News continues now with the national and international stories. That's at 6:30. Here's a look at what's happening with Alistair Stewart.
A backlash is underway against the darker side of social media. An army of advertisers quits the website where bullying messages push teens to suicide. But will it stop the vile abuse? The latest on the acid attack on 2 young British women working as volunteer teachers in Tanzania. And About Time. Richard Curtis manages a joke in the title of his final movie as the daddy of British rom-com. Join Julie Etchingham and me at 6:30.
Right, let's get a quick bit of sport now. And Chesterfield were knocked out of the League Cup by Leeds last night, but Notts County are through to the second round following a 5-goal thriller. County had to come from behind after Fleetwood took an early lead. Enoch Showunmi levelling the scores in the 28th minute. And County were in front before half-time when Danny Haynes latched onto a loose ball before firing in. Well, the win was effectively sealed in the second half. New signing Callum McGregor with a superb shot to make it 3-1. Well, later on, County had a man sent off who conceded another goal but held on for the victory. And the second round of the Capital One Cup draw has been announced. Details, of course, on our website, itv.com/central. Now, Rolls-Royce in Derby had a special visitor this morning as the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner flew over the factory as a thank you to the staff who designed and built its engines.
Yes, development of the Trent 1000 engine started a decade ago and has recently been rolled out to aircraft around the world. British Airways will continue testing in the UK tomorrow, as Michael Sibbett reports.
Watching the satellites, waiting for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, whose engines were designed and built in Derby. Then, under the watchful eye of Sir Henry Royce, a glimpse, a fly past to thank the staff here who have worked for nearly a decade to see it in the sky.
Thousands of people here have all contributed in some way to the programme reaching this stage, and to see the aircraft actually flying with our engines on it and it being so quiet, it's an absolutely fantastic moment. Particularly up there flying with the Spitfire, so great kind of nod to our heritage. And yeah, an absolutely fabulous sight.
Development work started in Derby in 2004, and although there's already a Dreamliner flying out of East Midlands Airport, that's not using Rolls-Royce's Trent 1000 engine. Today's flypast was from British Airways, who will eventually run 24 of the new aircraft. It was the first time many people here had seen it in flight.
It was emotional. It was quite an emotional moment. There's thousands of people that have obviously worked for this day and on the Trent 1000. So it was. You almost wanted to clap and cheer it coming in. It was great.
I haven't seen one of these in the flesh yet. Well, a Dreamliner anyway. And to see it flying over us is just absolutely phenomenal. Very excited to see it.
The Dreamliners with Rolls-Royce's Trent 1000 engines are already being used by airlines in Japan, Chile, Norway and Poland, but British Airways' first short-haul flights start tomorrow to Stockholm before the long-haul flights to Canada start in a few weeks' time. Michael Sibbett, ITV News, Derby.
It's quite a memorable thank you, isn't it?
It is, just a bit.
Now, one of the stars of London 2012, Paralympic sprinter Richard Whitehead, is preparing for a gruelling charity challenge, running the length of Britain. Richard, who was born without lower legs, wants to show that disability is no barrier to achievement.
Well, the athlete from Burton Joyce in Nottinghamshire will set off on the 977-mile run next week. In the second of his special reports, Peter Bean looks at how Richard has always pushed himself and his body to the limit.
The Paralympics 2012 turned disabled athletes like Richard Whitehead into superstars. The Britain Richard grew up in, though, was a very different place. Born in 1976 with no legs below the knee, his disability set him apart. In his early childhood, sport was something he had to sit out.
He wanted to take his legs off to do football, you see.
And
at
gymnastics,
school.
yeah.
They won't let him do it.
And what legs did he have at this stage?
He had very, very old-fashioned legs that nobody would have nowadays. Wooden ones first.
Despite that, you know, he just wanted to play the sports that he wanted to play.
Yeah,
That's it, and
yeah.
that's all he wanted.
Because as far as he was concerned, why was there any bother? He just took his legs off and like you take your slippers off.
Those kind of obstacles have made me who I am today, and for me it's not about being handed things on a plate. I realise that I've had to work really hard to be in this situation.
And this is when he got his bike.
And he wanted to ride like all the other children.
Richard's parents were determined he should try his hand at whatever sport he wanted. He first excelled in the pool. Even the local paper took note. He would eventually go on to represent his country.
I think I was quite a shy child through getting over the fear of water and obviously breaking down a lot of barriers in society. I've obviously gained a lot of confidence. How's the everybody, all right? Long time no see. Long time no see. Eddie.
Growing up in Loudham in Nottinghamshire, two of Richard's closest friends were Adi Harling and Eddie Moorcroft. They've met up again in the park where they used to play football with other boys from the village.
Yeah, we used to have some good knockabouts down here.
Yeah.
Are these stories true about using his legs for goalposts? Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we used to use it every so often. She used to put your little stumps on, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And you should moving them as well. You know, his penalty time, you lift them in a little bit.
Yeah.
Was Richard as competitive then as he is now? Absolutely, yeah. I think Rich always wanted to win. You know, I think we all liked playing sports, didn't we? But you could just see that Rich really wanted to win in everything he did, whether it's cricket, football, and yeah, he'd often try and cheat as well. Wouldn't he? Yeah.
For Richard, sport has always been about pushing back the boundaries. But it wasn't until 2004 that he discovered a sport which could make him a world beater. His first marathon in New York took him over 5 hours. He's since run 2 hours 42 minutes, a world record for leg amputees. On the track, he's Paralympic champion, world champion and world record holder at 200 metres in his class. At 37, you could forgive him for hanging up the blades. Instead, he's pushing back the boundaries further, running the length of Britain in the biggest physical challenge of his life.
There's so many things you've tried your hand at, I mean, skydiving. Is there anything that you've actually looked at and said, actually I don't think I can do that?
No, not really. I don't know, I think I enjoy the challenge as well as the actual event itself, so, but no.
As he runs from John O'Groats to Land's End, Richard will face mountains, harsh weather, fatigue. They should be no bother. He's been overcoming obstacles all his life.
Do you get the impression he's just a little bit competitive?
Just a tad. I love the bit about using his legs for the goalpost as well.
Yeah.
Innovative.
Yeah. Well, we've got part 3, haven't we, still to come. But
yes.
See, there's lots more on Richard Whitehead on our website too.
Yes, indeed. Particularly how you can get involved in that in terms of helping him. It's all on the website, itv.com/central. In that report tomorrow, we're going to be finding out just how much of a tough ask it is for him. It's 977 miles. I think we know it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think he'll do it though.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll keep tabs on it. In the meantime, though, let's find out exactly what's happening with the weather situation. With all the details, here's Lucy.
It's so hot over there, this guy says he can fry an egg on his head.
Well, that's just stupid. Fancy breakfast?
Hello, well I couldn't resist this picture. The lovely Max the dog enjoying Bosworth Battlefield. Thank you very much for sending us that picture. So then, as we head through the next 24 hours, we've got some rain on the way. It's moving in from the west as we speak. It's going to be tracking in an easterly direction overnight. Now, it's going to be fairly patchy, but we could see the odd heavy downpour as well. And it won't feel quite as chilly as it did last night with the cloud and outbreaks of rain. So lows overnight tonight of around 13 or 14 degrees Celsius. And then through the morning tomorrow, well, most of the rain will have cleared away, but we are going to see just 1 or 2 showers dotted around, and these will gradually ease and it will be an improving picture as we head into the afternoon. Plenty of sunny spells on offer, not quite as warm as today. Highs of around 21 degrees Celsius, 21 is 70. And as we move into the weekend, it's looking like Saturday will be the driest and brightest day of the two.
Flybe, sponsors of ITV Central Weather. Suffering from hay fever? ITV Pollen Count is sponsored by Benadryl.
Well, the good news is pollen levels are behaving as we head through the next few days. They're going to remain low as we move through Friday and into the weekend as well. Have a nice evening.
And just before we go, we have time to say Happy Eid or Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim viewers who are celebrating the end of Ramadan today and no doubt enjoying eating at the right time again.
At the right time.
Yeah.
Yes, the ITV News continues after us, of course, with the national and international headlines, so do stay tuned for that. I'll be back with a full update after news at 10 at 10:30 tonight, but for now, from the team here, have a good evening. Goodbye for now.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.